We have seen the FIA mess up pretty badly this season, but this one is by far the worst of the lot. As the field drove past the tractor recovering Carlos Sainz's car, every driver would have been thinking about Jules Bianchi's crash in 2014. But it was the images of Pierre Gasly missing the recovery vehicle by mere inches, without any warning that it was there, that chilled the blood of F1 fans around the world. How could we have come so close to tragedy again? And what are the drivers going to do about it? Stay with us to find out. I could have killed myself. Gasly fumed in the media pen after almost losing his life at the Japanese Grand Prix. The soaking wet Suzuka circuit was always going to deliver heart-in-mouth moments, but no one expected this. After Carlos Sainz's first lap crash, the entire field passed a tractor that was on track collecting the Ferrari. If that wasn't shocking enough, the footage of the tractor appearing out of the rain on the racing line as Pierre Gasly was travelling at 200 km an hour to catch up with the safety car has shook the Formula One world to its core. Max Verstappen won the Drivers' Championship last weekend, but all anyone is talking about is how unbelievably dangerous the tractor on track was. In 2014, at another rain-affected Japanese Grand Prix, at the very same Suzuka circuit, Jules Bianchi collided with a tractor, collecting a car from the barriers at the Dunlop curve. He would die from the injuries sustained in that accident. The recovery of Carlos Sainz's car this year was far more dangerous than the situation that resulted in Jules' death 8 years ago. The investigation into Bianchi's crash found there was no single cause for Bianchi's accident. Instead, the contributing factors were found to include track conditions, car speed, and the presence of a recovery vehicle on the circuit. All of these factors were present in Japan again. The track was drenched. Drivers couldn't see more than a meter or two in front of them while following cars, and even Pierre Gasly, who was well behind the field when he passed the tractor, couldn't see more than a few tens of meters in front of him. As he passed the tractor, Pierre Gasly was traveling at over 200 kilometers per hour. Some people, including some Sky One analysts, tried to put the risk of the incident on Gasly for his speed, but we'll explain why that is ridiculous shortly. And obviously, the presence of a recovery vehicle on the circuit happened again. The facts, as I just laid out, imply that Formula One learned absolutely nothing from Jules Bianchi's death. With all of the outrage around this incident, that might be the saddest part of all. A driver lost his life 8 years ago, and since then, apparently nothing has changed. How is that even possible? Let's break down those 3 findings from Bianchi's accident and assess what the FIA has learned from them and how those risk factors could have been minimized in this case. We'll talk about the risk to Pierre, but also to the rest of the field. The AlphaTauri driver is taking the headlines, but the FIA put every single driver's life at risk in Japan. Then we'll look at what the drivers are going to do about the FIA needlessly risking their lives. First of all, let's look at the track conditions. Holding the Japanese Grand Prix during the monsoon season is asking for trouble. Like in 2014, the 2022 Grand Prix was heavily affected by rain, and after the first lap, we had to wait 2 hours before seeing cars on track again. There have been attempts to move the race out of monsoon season, but apparently the owners of the track haven't been open to that happening. When racing at a wet circuit though, you have to take the risks that come with that into account, something the FIA didn't do in this incident. Any driver can aquaplane at any time. Mick Schumacher did on his way back to the pits after FP1 had finished on the Friday. Carlos Sainz did on the first lap of the race, resulting in the tractor being on track. Jules Bianchi did before his collision with a tractor in 2014. This is clearly a huge risk, and yet the FIA didn't take it into account here. Pierre Gasly, or any of the 19 drivers behind the safety car, could have lost control of their car and collided with the tractor on track. Clearly, the FIA have not learned from that. The track conditions also affect visibility. The tractor, while parked on the racing line, had its lights on, but from Pierre Gasly's onboard footage, he clearly didn't see it until he was less than a second from it. The drivers behind the safety car had even worse visibility though, and any one of them could have hit the tractor without ever knowing what they hit. This is a massive problem, and something the FIA will need to address. The second factor in Jules' crash was speed. The cars that were in the safety car train had been slowed down behind it. Pierre Gasly was travelling at around 200 km per hour though as he passed it. As he came up to the tractor, the race was still yellow flagged and he was respecting his delta times. As he passed the tractor, the race was red flagged, meaning he had to slow further. The FIA did issue him with a penalty after the race for speeding, but that was much later in the lap, after he passed the tractor and the race was red flagged. After the 2014 incident, the FIA changed the rules to stop marshals and recovery vehicles coming onto the track, unless the field was behind the safety car. Last weekend, that wasn't the case though. Pierre Gasly was nowhere near the safety car after having to stop to get a new wing. The FIA needs to address why they didn't follow their own rules here. It isn't just Pierre Gasly who was put at risk, but also the marshals who were helping recover the car. Gasly could have easily hit a marshal while traveling at 200 km per hour. During the red flag, Sky F1's Karun Chandhok and Paul di Resta suggested Gasly should bear some of the blame for the close call due to the speed he was traveling. "He's pushing on, you can listen here, and he's going a lot faster than anyone else is on track," said Chandhok. Di Resta then said, "I think when he looks back at his onboard camera, he's considerably quicker than the other cars passing that incident." Chandhok finished by saying, "It's double waved yellow flags and then the red. We know this from junior Formula racing. You have to go at a speed at which you can be prepared to stop, and he's quite clearly going a lot quicker than anyone else was." Let's be clear. No matter what speed Gasly or any other driver was traveling at, if they would have hit the tractor, they would have died. When Max Verstappen crashed at Silverstone in 2021, he hit the barrier at 257 km per hour and generated 51 G of force. The tyre barrier did its job of slowing him as safely as possible, caving the barrier in, but saving his life. In 2020, Romain Grosjean's Haas burst into flames after hitting a barrier at 191 km per hour, generating 67 G of force. His life was spared because the barrier was designed to be able to break up on impact. In 2014, Jules Bianchi was traveling at 125 km per hour, far slower than Grosjean or Verstappen. Yet his impact with the tractor generated 254 G of force. Want to know why that tractor looks completely undamaged? It's because tractors are not made to absorb the impact of an 800 kilogram car, traveling at speeds exceeding 300 km an hour. The drivers could have been doing 20 km an hour and still been seriously injured if they hit it. Same can be said if they hit a marshal. Speed may have made Bianchi's injuries worse, but in this case, reducing the speed of the cars as they passed the tractor would have done almost nothing to reduce the risk of an accident happening. The final factor the investigation into Jules Bianchi's crash pointed to was the presence of a recovery vehicle on the circuit. Do we really need to talk through this one? Clearly, there is a recovery vehicle on the circuit. In fact, in this case, it's even worse. The vehicle isn't just on the circuit, it's sat on track, on the racing line. Does it look to you like the FIA has learned anything? Because it definitely doesn't look like it to us. Pierre Gasly's team radio said it all. "What is this tractor on track?" he shouted just after passing the tractor. "I passed next to it. This is unacceptable. Remember what has happened. I can't believe this." It was his radio message that really made people look at this and wonder what the hell race control were thinking. Carlos Sainz echoed Gasly's message when he spoke to the media after making it back to the pits. "I still don't know why in these conditions we keep risking having a tractor on track, because it's just worthless. If you're going to red flag it anyway, why risk it?" As the 18 drivers remaining in the race waited for the conditions to clear, they apparently were all messaging each other expressing their outrage at what had happened. George Russell, a leader of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, pointed out that this isn't something new on the drivers' minds. "I think we spoke a little bit about it in the drivers' briefing this week," Russell said, "because there was a tractor on track in Singapore with Tsunoda's crash under a safety car, and it was at the point that people were transitioning to slicks. And we expressed our view that we don't ever want to see that happen. That was obviously last week. To come here 1 week later, given the circumstances and the history of course, it's pretty disappointing. We're all going to of course speak to the FIA. In our view, it's pretty straightforward. No tractors on track. And if you need a tractor on track, red flag it." We've constantly spoken this season about the drivers' disappointment in the FIA, their handling of the sport, their choice of venues and their race direction. This is another catastrophic error by Formula One's governing body, which this time very nearly ended in tragedy. If the FIA didn't learn anything from Jules Bianchi's death, then how many more drivers need to die for them to learn?